Hello everyone, and welcome to another event in the series presented by the Amherst Irish Association. We're in our 9th year. Is that right? Yeah, time goes by. We are adapting again back to in-person meetings. We have safety protocols. We're trying to do the best we can by everyone. We'll put the fans on to move some air around, and the weather people told us it was going to be almost 50 today. It's not. We do about windows, maybe not. But we're just trying to be safe for everyone because we do care deeply about all of you. We want you to be safe with us, and we're so happy to have you back in person after such a long time. I'm Sam Hannigan. I always forget to tell you who I am. I usually give everyone just the origin story of the Amherst Irish Association. Most of you have heard it, I know. We record these for YouTube, and so we'll have folks checking in who haven't seen this before. So our organization was started in 2014 after a really ugly incident here in our town that was called the Blarney Blowout, and it was really an awful scene with lots of public drunkenness, and it was sad for all of us to see, and so we decided that we wanted to change the narrative of what it means to be Irish and what it means to be Irish in Amherst, and so we started this event series. We moved it. We found this venue, which is marvelous, here in the Unitarian Church in Amherst. We were intentional about not operating out of a pub or a bar. And we have had so many speakers come. Every one of them is a volunteer. All the people who do the work are volunteers. And it's just grown and grown and grown to the point where we're overwhelmed with the success that we've had. And we're grateful to all of you as members. And with that, I will turn it over to Ida, who has some more thanks to share, and we'll introduce our speaker today.
Thank you, Sam. All right, can you hear me okay? This is working. Yeah. We won't turn the fans on during the presentation because our feedback from the members is a bit chilly, and I really will need it. But it's when we'll be gathering around the team's phones. But let me begin by saying, Fáilte Roimh, John. You're all very welcome. We're delighted to see your two faces over the masks, under the masks, and around the masks. But onward we go. A few little notices before I introduce our guest speaker today, Elizabeth Stack, a fine woman from Listowel, County Kerry. First is, we're the 29th of January, and you know what we're coming up to? And our little logo, or our St. Bridget's. St. Bridget's. It's a Bridget's Cross or a St. Bridget's Cross, whatever your preference is in terms of understanding her influence on Irish culture. And we wanted to remind you that we had a session last year on Bridget, pagan goddess and saint, and that's on the Amherst Irish YouTube site, as is any of our presentations that took place during COVID. So there's a wealth of sessions there available to you if you haven't been able to make any of the ones so far. But we're not Hollywood style folks, so don't be expecting that kind of quality. It is, as Sam reminded us, we're a community group, we're all volunteers, we're doing this because we love to do it. Our speakers, our members are all involved. Our Kiltori, Jonathan and Amanda gather our musicians for the tea and tunes after each session, and all of us row in to make it what it is. So Fáilte Roimh, John, is there sco héad mar in the we thrive in our togetherness. Not a bad message for these times. Okay, so a reminder about Bridget's Eve, which is the 31st. One of the customs is to hang out a bit of a rag. Some people hang out a little underwear, perhaps for a little overt protection during times of stress and so forth. But whatever is your preference, Bridget's Eve, hang it out, get the blessing, bring it in. If you want to learn more about Bridget, as I say, have a look at that YouTube, Amherst Irish. It was last year's January. Okay, so it is my pleasure and my honour to welcome Elizabeth Stack, historian, and she has the wonderful job of being the CEO of the Irish American Heritage Museum in Albany, New York, which I always find is interesting that it's actually the capital of New York State. And so the heartland, my references are all about FDR and going up there and political scheming and all the rest of it. But much to my shame, I haven't been there yet. But the team, the Amherst Irish team, are arranging to go up and visit with Elizabeth. And that's part of our reason, is to widen our horizons about linking with other groups that are doing things with a similar mission to our own, so that when we're not doing something, we can support them and vice versa. So please welcome our guest today, Elizabeth Stack, a historian, director of the Irish American Historical Museum in Albany, New York. Gurmi and Margaret.
agus tá ásarum a bheith ann in nuach. I'm delighted to be here today. The underwear is a new twist for me, I have to say, on the St. Bridget's thing, so that might cure the 46 years of spinsterhood that I've been living. I'm going to try it and I'll let you know next year. So you can cut that out. I'm sure my grandmother's prayers will be answered. So I'm going to speak to you today a little bit about our mission at the museum and where we are. I suppose we're similar to yourselves in that we kind of are a community-based organisation as well. We're 35 years technically, 36 now. But we were founded initially down in East Durham, so it very much was a seasonal, down in the Catskills, seasonal kind of an operation. And we had several exhibitions that we would put up, but it was not really a place of scholarship or that kind of thing. And then we moved to Albany because the American Irish legislators had founded us, so it was kind of always the vision that we would be city-based. I went in there 5 years ago, and of course then we moved just the month before COVID hit, and so we still don't have our permanent exhibition installed because things got delayed and money dried up and audiences dried up. So like yourselves, we pivoted to online, and we also have a YouTube channel and social media and all that. So most of our talks are hybrid. It is difficult, I think, to kind of balance that because, as you say, the production value sometimes isn't, great. I nearly at this stage prefer just doing Zoom instead of the hybrid because at least with Zoom you can control it. So you're more than welcome to look at our talks. We do a lot of different kind of academic talks and cultural stuff. So our mission, is we're an educational institution, 501c3, and the mission is to really explore the contributions and the history and culture of Irish people in America. I suppose sometimes that gets a bit tricky because you want to be inclusive, but at the same time you can't have mission creep. So we do engage sometimes. This year, for instance, we're doing a series called The Irish and we look at how the Irish and the Chinese, or the Irish and the Italian, the Irish and African Americans got on or did not get on. It's, it can be a mixed bag sometimes. And, there is unfortunately the stigma. We had our problems, it was called Eggs and Kegs in Albany, that was revolving around the St. Patrick's Day parade. And anyone who grew up in Ireland, it's in the middle of Lent, the pubs used to be closed, It was never about drinking at home in Ireland, and so, that has changed obviously now too. But my memories of St. Patrick's Day were going to Mass, Oscuega in Irish, and then you could break your Lenten fast and there would always be green ice cream. And we marched in the parade, and it was very much like the community, So I suppose we're trying to bring a little bit of that into our museum, and we're also trying to, I suppose, change a little bit the perception of Ireland, because Ireland, as you mostly know at this stage, has changed a lot in the last 15 or 20 years, maybe even only the last 10 years. But we have now same-sex marriage, our Taoiseach is a gay man, we've repealed the 8th Amendment, which was devastating for women's health. And so, Ireland is a very different country of the country that your grandparents left or that you left maybe in, the 50s or 60s. And so I think there still is a little bit of work to do to explain, Ireland is progressive in lots of ways. It's sort of European in some of its outlook. Naturally, we're very concerned, as Irish America is, with Brexit and, the Northern Ireland Protocol. And if you saw the news out of Ireland on Friday, they've done a huge survey, and most Irish people have absolutely, I would say Southern Irish, have no ties to people on the other side of the border. And so that was kind of shocking. I myself have only ever been to Armagh, you know, I've never been to Belfast. Although my parents do business with people in the north, it is very much seen, I think, you know, by the majority of Irish people, it seems, as kind of a separate country. And so there's a lot of work to be done before union takes place. So we explore that a lot in our museum. So I want to do a brief kind of presentation of the contributions of the Irish. I'm not going to read a presentation, so hopefully I'll be coherent. And my talk, I'll try and match my slides, which you could be enjoying the slides as I'm talking, because there's a lot of them. So, you know, Irish people have contributed a lot in terms of, there's a lot of Irish who were unnamed. You know, we always tend to go for the big, you know, the Grace Kellys and the Barack Obamas and the Timothy Mars. But of course, most Irish immigrants here were nameless and faceless. They worked as maids. I just posted the other day about your own Margaret Maher here in Emily Dickinson's house. I mean, she's famous because her employer was famous. But look at all the other girls who came over, often in more numbers than men, and absolutely sent home millions of dollars in remittances to Ireland, and then helped build churches and hospitals throughout this country. Nameless, faceless men who built the Erie Canal and the railroads and the subways and the buildings. So, you know, sometimes you will kind of see our contribution is not noticed, and of course, you know, we worked side by side with Chinese labourers, with enslaved African people on some of these big projects like the White House. So we try to tell not just the story of the famous people, but of course it's easier to tell the famous people. So the rough overview, even though Irish have been coming here since the year dot, if you believe St. Brendan may have come here before anyone else practically, Harry Man of course, so nothing would surprise me. And you know, there was an Irish man on board the ships with Christopher Columbus, but the big amount of particularly Catholic Irish who came in was during the Great Hunger. So between 1845 and roughly 1851, some scholars change the dates. Ireland, the most densely populated country in Europe at the time, with about 8 million, about 25% of that population absolutely dependent on the potato, landless cottiers. They were kind of living on subdivided farmland. So really it's impossible, I suppose, to get an accurate number, but I will say most historians, and particularly historians in Ireland, do not call it a genocide. There's a legal definition of genocide that this doesn't quite match. Yes, we lost a quarter, you know, of our population to both immigration and death, but you know, it wasn't as simple. Nothing ever is, of course, black or white, right? But it wasn't as simple as the English killed the Irish. Many landlords went bankrupt trying to keep their estates going. They forgave the rent for those few years. They tried feeding their tenants. Many Irish people were agents in the middle. You know, Irish shopkeepers thrived. My own family were on the board of guardians that administered the workhouse in my town. So, you know, Irish people who thrived did so because their neighbours died or left. And so the famine absolutely transformed America. You could argue, of course, it transformed Ireland, and you could argue that it transformed America too, because we do come in these massive numbers to Canada and America. So this is a model of a workhouse we have in the museum. And you know, this was kind of the bugbear of Irish memory. You know, most of them were built specifically for the Great Hunger. The Act was passed in 1836. Construction began around 1840. One in my town was built and opened in 46. And it was built to house 700 people, but by the end of that year there was over 1,100 in it. So conditions were horrific. People did not want to go in. They were seen as being very shameful. But it was sometimes your only option. Now, if you went in, of course, you were separated by age and by gender. So men and, you know, boys between 2 and 15 on one side, and girls on the other side with women. In the stone workhouse, in the minutes, the matron recorded that she had to punish a young boy who was 7 years of age because he had gone from his dorm over to find his sister and sleep with her. And they slept on the floor in rushes. You know, it was horrific. A 2-year-old child scalded herself to death pulling down the pot of soup because she was so hungry trying to get into it. So, you know, conditions were horrific. It really was a last resort. Most people, if they could at all, either sold everything they had to get to America, or some of them by now had people here, particularly around our region in New York because of the Erie Canal and things like that. There was a lot of assisted immigration schemes. So the landlord in Kenmare, for instance, sent his entire group out. Most of them ended up in 5 points, so Tyler Albinder has done amazing work tracking them. And he did a very good talk with us last year, where he said if they knew someone when they came, they actually survived in 5, because there's this kind of statistic that's taken for granted that 7 years was the lifespan of a family or an immigrant. And no, you know, if they knew someone, they actually did quite well. Immigration. Yes, oh yeah, and the other landlord that immigrated them out was Sligo, Palmerston up in Sligo, and his people were sent to Groseal, practically got off the ship naked. Now Groseal had a tough time because the ships froze in the bay, you probably heard all of that, so like there's hundreds of thousands dead up there, but he hadn't given them any provisions for the journey. So there was a lot, and it was cheaper to go to Canada too, because it's the British Empire, you know. So bad press starts to circulate about these Irish who are coming in, absolutely helpless. And you know, the thing that I say all the time is, particularly where we are now with refugees from Ukraine and Syria and all kinds of places, that was us. We fled with nothing, with sometimes not even the language. You know, like Irish had been outlawed in Ireland, of course, under the penal laws, but in the Western Seaboard, a lot of people spoke Irish. So, you know, it was alien for them to come in here with nothing, possibly not speaking the language. It's exactly the same story, just different people, you know, different borders and different methods of transportation. So I think, if anything, the Great Hunger teaches us that we must have empathy for people, and this idea that our people came in the right way. There was no right way. Immigration wasn't federally, you know, overseen until 1924. Even when Ellis Island opened, that's another myth, you know, our name was changed in Ellis Island. It wasn't. Your name was with you on the ship's register, and they just ticked the box, you know. So if you change, you might have changed your name in Ireland, or somebody made a mistake there. So we have to be very careful when we talk about our journey and our bootstraps, and you know, the handout that we did or did not get, because we had a, you know, a torturous journey too. So this painting is New York Harbour, and you can see, like Pat Murphy, the trunk is spelled wrong, or Murphy is spelled wrong, and Markey is spelled wrong. There's guys here that look like they might be what was called runners, so they would go to you with an Irish accent and say, oh, you know, my sister runs a boarding house, let me help you get there. They'd either run off with your luggage, or they'd, you know, kind of keep you until you paid them back money. They would often give immigrants what was a brochure for a train ticket or a ferry out of New York and take their money, and there was no, it wasn't a ticket. So, you know, our own were just as bad to us as so-called Yankees or Protestants, you know. This is the inside of that building, Castle Clinton, the circular one. So in the 1850s, around 1851-53, both the German Immigrant Aid and the Irish Immigrant Aid Society got together, because there literally was no oversight at a harbour like that. You know, there's evidence in papers, particularly the Boston Pilot, you probably know all about it, you know, looking for my brother, he was supposed to have arrived on whatever ship, has anyone seen him? People just disappeared at these ports, you know, and so very, very traumatic. Like, you know, there was a story told of one girl who was coming over and her brother didn't recognise her because she was 5 when he left, and now she's a grown woman, so like she's unclaimed, you know, at the port. So if finally the Immigrant Aid Societies get together and use that centre as a kind of a drop zone, like do not leave here until we help you find a job or help you locate your people. So this was the beginning of helping immigrants. And then I was talking about like the prejudice. So this is 5 points, and I was saying to you, a lot of these people are from Kerry, from Kenmare. You know, a 5 points rum shop, it says, so of course, you know, the woman standing at the counter drinking, a child getting a flagon or the jug filled up. This idea, you know, that the Irish displayed about drinking, when actually the bars were a very important centre of the community, because you could get a job there. Usually at this time, the pub owner was a ward, district, or assembly member or something, so he had patronage jobs available to sweep the snow off the streets, you know, or maybe getting in with the cops. So here's some of this Know Nothing. New York had what was called a Know Nothing, or this American party, this anti-immigration party. So Native Americans, of course, does not refer to the natives, it refers to the WASPs. But, you know, like, beware of the foreign influence. And so the big thing that bothered people in cities like Boston and New York, of course, was the Catholicism. The Catholics were seen as very, very clannish, very different. You know, they brought funny kind of statues with them, all of these, you know, the entrapment of their religion was seen as very foreign. So you've got these, you know, shall American labour be protected against the foreign corruptions? They're taking our jobs. Everything that we still hear today, you know, that's the one thing as a historian plus a change, right? So, and these cartoons continue into the 1880s and 1890s. So Thomas Nast, who was himself an immigrant and had been Catholic but married a wealthy woman and converted, he is saying like this is poor Columbia's choice, that she's caught between, you know, the German stereotype Fritz, and he's all into labour unions and stuff, and then the Irish are for some reason depicted always as a lawless savage. Like there's very simian features in the face, they always have a shillelagh, which kind of drives me cracked. There's always alcohol involved, and there's often a reference to their campaign in Britain to get independence, and that Irish American funds that. So these Fenians, you know, are here. They have started a bombing campaign by this point in England. So, you know, the usual Irish way of doing business is Uncle Sam's gunpowder, and this kind of lawless, like he looks like he's, you know, about to set fire to himself, he's so out of it, you know. And of course then the Democratic Party being divided between the church and these lawless savages. Now, in reality, this is what we have. The Immigrant Savings Bank was set up in the 1850s by Dagger John, as he was known, Archbishop Hughes, who also set up Forward University, and some of those Irish immigrant aid people. And so, you know, these are people now who, instead of sometimes sending money home, sent home the actual ship, you know, ticket. And very orderly, they all seem lovely. You know, a lot of these girls, as I say, were working as maids. This was also a labour exchange. So these are very orderly scenes, and these records are available online in the New York Public Library. It's the Immigrant Savings Bank. Your own Massachusetts Foresters, something, it was like an insurance group, they have brilliant records. Now I think you have to contact them to say, like, look up my people, but our genealogist gave a talk on that, it's on our YouTube page. Amazing information, because they talked about, for, you know, a change, the mothers as well. So like if a working man got insurance for this Foresters thing, they would ask him about his mother, because maybe he has a heart condition, you know, what age did your mother die? So we get the mother's information, where they were from in Ireland too, which is very interesting. And here's, of course, our servant girl problem, Louisa May Alcott, who had been a hero of mine now. So she talks about the Irish incapables who had been running her home for far too long, and she decides to put her foot down. You can see no Irish need apply in the ad. And, you know, this Bridget, you know, her dress isn't the right length, shamrocks on her dress, so she's patriotic to Ireland, not to America. Ironic that the shamrocks are orange, mind you, but that's a different thing. You know, like her earrings, she's really laying down the law. You know, the Irish are always seen as pugnacious, burning everything, of course, in the oven and breaking the plate. And then there's the poor little wasp, you know, mistress pleading with Bridget to, you know, do as she says. Another one here too, they go from paupers to potentates. And, you know, interesting, there's the Pope is in the corner in a picture. She's feeding an Irish-American cop. And again, like, very overdressed as a maid. You know, the waist is too cinched in, way too many patterns. And then, you know, her mistress is a lovely, sober American woman, ideal, you know. So, and again, this is what was actually going on. This is a family, well, the household staff of a family in Wisconsin. So, you know, hard work for these girls. I mean, in a house like this, it's grand because there's a team of you, but if you were the only maid, you're doing everything. You know, laundry was horrific in those days. Cleaning the fireplaces and all that, and then maybe living in a room off the kitchen or up in the attic, which wouldn't have been heated or air conditioned, probably had only cast-offs, you know, from the family. And so there's a very, I think, a tense awareness among American households, like that they've got these people in their midst that are not integrated with them. You know, and there's often you'll see letters to editors and papers like that, you know, my Bridget is wearing the same hat as me because she has the disposable income to go buy a hat. And they complain all the time about how nicely dressed Bridget is on her day off. It's funny. There was a book written by the nun of Kildare, she was called, to give these girls help and advice. And, you know, it could be technically quite difficult if you were you know, raped by the master of the house, or there's no lock on your door. The older boy that's close to you in age might, you know, seduce you, sort of. So there's all these things about make sure you get the Sabbath off, or, you know, keep your own company kind of thing. So some of these maids do absolutely, church is very important to them because that's where they can socialize. There was a story told about two girls in Troy, New York, near us, that funerals were the best way for them to meet people, and you got fed, of course, at a funeral at the wake. So they would go to every wake, it didn't matter who died, they were at it. And they went to one particular wake, and there was nobody there. You know, the coffin was open, and the widow was by herself. And they went up and stood over the corpse, and the wife said to them, you know, I'm so thankful to you for coming. nobody came because of the yellow fever. And they're like, oh, gee. So they stopped going to funerals. But church, sodalities and all this kind of thing was a good way to meet a partner. And now I would say you were kind of in trouble if you did not meet a partner, because you eventually outgrew the family. And there is no retirement policy, even today, for domestic workers or maids, chambermaids in hotels. And so, in the Irish American Historical Society in the city, the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick's have a lot of letters about, like, oh, there's a 67-year-old, what do we do with her? And they repatriate her to Roscommon, where she may not have known anybody, in Roscommon for 50 years. St. Patrick's Day, so we were talking about, our eggs and kegs incidents, but this is from, I think, 1897 or something, thing should be on it, but rum and blood, and the day that we celebrate. Now, of course, by this point, most of those police would have been Irish-American too, so it's not, but again, like, the cops are lovely visions of American manhood, and the Irish people are literal monkeys, they're, even the young one down there, look, has, like, sharp-fanged teeth. And again, actually, people like the AOH and Friendly Sons of St. Patrick were very conscious of this, idea of their reputation, and so St. Patrick's Day, particularly in New York, is very, very almost regimental. Like, you're not allowed, there's no floats. At home in Ireland, like, there's floats, kids are in costumes. This is like this is how good we are. A, we're a force to be reckoned with, we have a lot of votes, but B, like, we're your cops, we're your sanitation workers, we're your, whatever it is. So it's a shout, a showing of power and dignity. So they were very careful to not have the melee that you see there. Now, 2 or 3 areas that the Irish, of course, shine in is politics. I'm going to start speaking up because I don't know what time I'm on. But I will speak up. So, we get a lot of flack for the Tammany Hall backroom dealing. But I will say Tammany Hall, I love Terry Galway's book about this machine made. Tammany was a precursor to any kind of social welfare, actually. So it was quite progressive. And while, yes, there's a little bit of corruption, I think politics are still corrupt, but who am I to judge? And so, these people, provided you with a turkey at Christmas, so they took the kids to a park during the summer. They gave, your son a job if your husband died. If you were a widow, there was a little bit of help for you. So somebody like Al Smith, and even Big Tim Sullivan, who died rearing, God love him, of syphilis, tertiary syphilis, and owned a couple of brothels in the city. These were incredibly progressive men in terms of women's rights, in terms of labour rights. And so, it was important, I think, that we recognise that yes, like, all of them fattened their own coffers, but they do actually do a lot for the voices, and of course women, can't vote. So this cartoon is from 1893, and it says, the one element that won't mix. And, assimilation is such a loaded term when we talk about immigration, but here she, Colombia is stirring in a citizen with equal rights, and everybody else is lovely. There's a German guy and a Chinese guy, Russian even, and the Irish is, this kind of dressed up for St. Patrick's Day now. See, he's got the derby hat and all that on it, and the green flag, but also the knife and that monkey face still. And like, at this point, the Irish were well used to being in Ireland. The other place that Irish people contributed a lot to in the early days was the labour stuff. Now, this is Lewis Hines, it's not necessarily Irish kids. But Irish workers wore, we said, women mostly worked as maids, but it depended where you were. The Lowell factories at one point had a lot of Irish, that kind of displaced the American girls. Mother Jones was born in Cork, had a tragic life herself, but absolutely toured particularly the East Coast, working with minors and with children, trying to get children's working, stopped and conditions better for everybody. So here she is in West Virginia in 1912. She was around 100 when she died. She worked with people like Terence Powderly and stuff in the Knights of Labour. And again, they had been involved in labour, since the Molly Maguires. And yes, there were issues. They didn't always let African Americans, for instance, join the unions, but some unions did. And Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, very famous socialist, she was a founding member of the NAACP, but was kicked out because she was a communist, although they reinstated her in 1973. And so, this woman is from around, she's Leonora Barry and is Leonora O'Reilly. She was working in a carpet factory in Amsterdam, which is upstate New York too. So there was a lot of these, people who worked for the betterment of the community. And then, of course, the thing about it is culture. So the Irish were initially, I suppose, the butt of a lot of jokes. Even in theatre, you know, there was a lot of plays about Irish maids and greenhorns and stuff, and so when the Irish were not in the audience, they were the butt of the joke. And then, you know, you get people like Tony Pastor, who opens theatres along Broadway. He had a little bit of Irish in him as well. You get people like Stephen Foster, who had Irish in him and wrote a lot of the problematic, you know, songs about, you know, Cantown races and all these things, My Old Kentucky Home. But as time goes by, the Irish start to become producers of culture as well as just the consumers. And so how the Irish are depicted on stage and in song changes. So we go from being the butt of the joke to being in on the joke. Like first it was kind of, audiences liked to see, you know, the greenhorn, and they laughed at, oh yeah, I remember my mom talking about that, or, you know, she never put shoes on in the house. So they could kind of still laugh along with the joke. And then it kind of changes to where they don't actually like, because now they're lace curtain Irish, which again is a phrase I'm not loving. But this woman, for instance, Maggie Klein, very physical comedian. She was known as the Queen of Broadway, or the Irish Queen in the Bowery, Brunhilde. And she used to do a song, Down Went McCloskey, where she would kind of act out, you know, like a prize fighting match. And she was really, really physical, very famous. And she had a great rapport with her audience, you know. And then, so here you get to see like the Colleen Bawn, then people like Chauncey Alcott, breaking into society. There's a lot of like life in the tenements, the cross-cultural stuff like Abe's Irish Rose, you know, where an Irish person marries a Jewish person, comedy ensues. Here's the Stephen Foster stuff. So by the very early Harrigan and Hart, very, very popular during, you know, the post-Civil War era, and it was kind of the Civil War that transformed actually how the Irish were seen in the country because of their, you know, kind of involvement in the war. So, you know, there was a lot of trouble after Gettysburg and other battles that we were seen as being used as cannon fodder. But we came out of the war with our devotion to America, you know, secured, and like the patriotism of the thing accepted. So there's a lot of songs that come out of this. But then it's interesting, in around 1908, these were the Russell brothers. They were from Limerick originally. Very popular vaudeville Broadway act. And, you know, they dressed up as maids and they did skits, and Bridget was kind of harmless, you know, but innocent, I suppose you'd say, you know, but she would make a lot of stupid mistakes. And there was riots all of a sudden, because how dare you impugn Irish womanhood? And this, of course, coincides with what's going on in Ireland at the time, too, the Playboy of the Western world, and then they came to America and they were booed, you know. So they threw cabbages at them in Brooklyn and threatened to burn down the theatre if they were brought back, the AOH. And their career ended overnight, so this 25-year career. Bringing up father, very successful. Now this was an interesting one because the writer was Irish-American, but he never actually specifies that Maggie and James are Irish. It's clear that they are if you know the kind of markers, but the tension is because he's won the lottery or something. It started as a comic strip and then it was lots of plays on Broadway. He never fits in with the high society, so he would run down the Bowery drinking beer. The wife, you can see, is kind of overdressed. You know, she's trying her best to fit in with Fifth Avenue. Their daughter manages to Spanish, so this is the tension between immigrants and first generation and second generation. The daughter is beautiful and she gets married to, you know, a lovely kind of Irish-American guy. Again, not specified, but, you know, she marries above her class. And so then we have these people like Chauncey Alcott, the Four Cohens, who had been Keohane. He went on to write some of the most iconic songs, you know, Over There, Little Minnie Kelly, all of these songs. So, and then, of course, back to politics. So every president since, I think, Nixon, except Clinton's, is disputed. Some people say there's a Roscommon connection, but it has never been actually kind of verified. And Trump does not have an Irish connection. I didn't comment on whether that was going to happen. He has, of course, a golf club in Ireland, but there's no ancestry. But every other president since Kennedy, I think, has had Irish links, and more before those, of course. So, you know, when Obama went back, they painted the town for him, and, you know, there's a whole new garage and a little restaurant outside the town, the Obama Plaza. And Joe Biden, very proud of his links in Mayo and someplace else. So I suppose, you know, we're kind of an aging demographic in one way. I think even though we still have a lot of Irish in pockets, maybe the power, the visibility of the power is diluted because we have been intermarrying with other groups, and I think some people don't necessarily claim their Irish Americanness anymore. So I don't know what that means long term for groups like Ye or our museum. You know, as I say, you know, we do have to be conscious of including the rest of the story, but also telling our story as part of that. So that's where we're at the museum, that we're encouraging outreach as well as trying to preserve the traditions. So thanks very much, and I'll take questions if there are any.
So what do you think is the origin of that sort of, the original sort of, you know, feature, sort of like,
The simian?
the simian, yeah, what was the origin of that? Do you know?
They say, actually, it was the British press. So there's a very good tiny book called From Apes to Angels, I think, or Apes and Angels, and it tracks the British press in the very early 1800s, maybe the 1810s and 12s. You know, that start, because of course, you know, the Irish had never settled down after the Act of Union. So certainly by the 1830s, there's this idea, and the two countries were so inextricably linked. Like there had been immigration back and forth, you know, between Ireland and England, but it looks like it's appearing in Punch and other British papers, and then appears in American papers. So it's a strange one, because you wouldn't, you know, you would think Americans wouldn't necessarily adopt a British, you know, export like that. But it must have been reflective of how some people felt in the community. So even the Louisa May Alcott, you know, paper article that talks about Irish incapables, you know, she doesn't say like no Irish need apply, but it's obviously accepted by her readers that the Irish are not great, you know, to have in your home. And so she does go out of her way, like she'll choose 6 or 7 people who are not Irish. An American woman can't last, like it's too hard going up and down the stairs with buckets and stuff. So finally she gets somebody. But it was obviously okay, you know, in households. And like I have another side someplace else with about 7 in a row, German girl preferred, you know, Protestant, and then 2 or 3 of them say specifically no Irish need apply. So there were code words for the ones who were a little bit, you know, more aware of how it looked, but they were flat out no Irish need apply too when they wanted to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what do you think about the red shirt parade that happened last summer, with the language that was to bring the language front and center? Is there the young people, like they go to T.D. Morgan, are they helping bring the language back?
Yes, you mean at home?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the language movement at home is, on both sides of the border, is, I would say, kind of thriving. Like, it's difficult, you know, I haven't lived at home since 2005, and my town is a Gaeilgeoir town. Even now our pub, John McKean's pub, is doing a pop-up Gaeltacht, you know, every month. So I think some of it is down to the school system. Like, we all learned Irish, you could argue it was taught badly. Like, I think I probably have more French after 5 years than I do Irish after 13, you know. Because they don't really explain to you what you're learning. And Irish is a difficult language, you know, where our syntax is different, yada yada. That's a little Irish racer right there. But, so, you know, it's just not taught great, and you don't use it outside of school, which is a bit of a pity. But now, because, you know, our school system is changing at the moment because the church run a lot of the state institutions like schools and hospitals, and so particularly in cities like in Dublin where the population has just you know, outpaced itself, there was a baptism requirement to get into a state school, and like religion is part of the day. You know, we started every class with a prayer, we automatically, you know, made our communion and confession and all that. So that had to stop in schools in Dublin in particular, because so much of the population are now not Irish born or not Catholic, or the Irish born are not practicing Catholics. So you see a lot of, we call them charter schools, that are Irish language schools, and that's helping. And then on the northern side, people like, I forget if Linda is at Irvine, you know, yeah, so like even the unionist population up there are kind of reclaiming that part of their identity, that, you know, they spoke Irish in the 1600s, and so why not? So I think, you know, the longer I live abroad, the more important I think it is to preserve our language, which is the sad thing that you know, like none of my family are into it, and it is kind of sad, I think, to see. We just take it so much for granted because we do learn it, but we don't use it. So now, you know, the broadcasting with Tina G are very good, and they commission a lot of very, you know, important documentaries, and even modern, like there's a soap opera. There's a stupid dating show, you know, so, but it's important that you see the culture, the language isn't, you know, oh, come on, Pegs Ayers is 1 foot in the grave in 1 foot, like it is a dating show, and so it's a living language, So yeah, I think it is getting better, but it'll take time.
Yeah.
Were you, oh no, I've got someone over here at hand. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Irish American Heritage Museum, like hours and permanent displays, rotating?
I can. So yes, we have rotating displays and what we call our front gallery. At the moment we have a thing up about the Currachs and the Basket Islands and the Aran Islands and the writers who came off that. We'll probably change in February to, I'm not sure what. And then we'll do one about the women of the Easter Rising for April. We lend those sometimes, so they're different. In the old days, I made them on these massive boards that I can hardly carry myself. Now we print them on linen or canvas or basically lawn sign material. The back exhibition, which is huge and basically deals with the Irish in the military, the Irish in sports and culture, the Irish in politics, the founding fathers, the colonial era, and the Irish in labour. That will be, I hope, installed in the next month. They're waiting on me to finally edit it, so it's my fault if it's not up. And then, we do a lot of events, maybe like 8. We're trying to limit it now to about 8 or 9 a month. So, for instance, it's a lot, I know, yeah. And at this point, we're kind of diluting our own audience now that we are back in person too, So, I like doing it because we have an education mission, and particularly Zoom has freed up the whole thing. But on Monday, we have Margaret Lynch Brennan, who's a doctor, and she's talking about the Irish maids, the Bridget. On the 1st, we have an event in the house about St. Bridget, we're going to make crosses and talk about divine femininity and all that. And then on Saturday, we have a local all-women Irish group. And then we have a film club, so we're showing a documentary called Untold Secrets about a woman who was in a Magdalene home at home in Ireland, and her son was taken from her, and her son will be with us. We have the African American Irish Diaspora Network in, because we want to mark Black History Month, and we will have a lecture from Graham Hodges about the interactions between Irish and African Americans in 5 points. So most of them are on Zoom. We have a local reporter too, he's from Troy, New York, Devlin Barrett, who is the crime and Justice Department kind of correspondent for the Washington Post. So he wrote a book about James Comey in November. Yeah, right. Don't even mention the war. And he's, following all the research developments too about the Justice Department are investigating in Washington. So he'll be interesting. This has nothing to do with Irish America. And it turns out actually he has a very limited, he's named after Bernadette Devlin, but they're not actually an Irish American family. So that's one of the few we have that has nothing to do with Irish America, but there you go. So yeah. Any other questions?
Elizabeth, thanks so much for this overview. And again, I want to build on Sam's question, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
You were set up, I think, the Irish American Heritage Museum by decree of the New York State Assembly, right? So you have a stream of resources coming from the state, or no?
Oh no. No, in fairness, they've been brilliant this last year, our Assembly members did. That is a problem, I think, for all of us, In the early days, definitely, there was money, there was members' items and all that, and those kind of things changed. It is difficult to fundraise, there's no doubt about it. For 3.5 years, I was the only employee. The Irish government fund us. We just this year got a New York State Council of the Arts grant for the first time. So, it is a little bit of a slog, I think, to prove yourself. You wouldn't think it would take 35 years to prove yourself, but to be fair, I think we've been through a few iterations. So, when we were down in East Durham, it was very seasonal, it was very lackadaisic. Then we had 7 years in Albany where we put a lot of money into a building to renovate it, which we were renting. And so that kind of depleted the coffers totally. And then there wasn't a director for about 6 or 7 months before I came in, so it was gone a bit stagnant. So, it took about 2 or 3 years for me to prove that yes, we are doing things, yes, we're active, yes, you can trust us with money. And I think, that's, I think the core of this is how are you managing being true to your mission, which is Irish America, and still being inclusive. And this is, for things like the National Endowment of Humanities, we've had feedback like that. Well, where is this group? And I wanted to do an exhibition of the Irish and American sport. I don't need to talk about any other group because we're talking about the Irish and American sport. You know what I mean? And so it's very different. We're not Cooperstown. I'm not going to talk about every baseball player. You know what I mean? So that can be difficult sometimes. That I think particularly American government entities don't want to fund a very niche organisation. And that's a little bit unfortunate, you know, so that's where the arts people are a bit more, the stage arts people are a bit more open, kind of, and that in turn allows us, like, you know, I'm delighted to be able to do the African American Irish Diaspora Network. You know, I think that is important work, you know, that they do, and to highlight another organisation, but it can get tricky, you know, like we're a membership-based organisation too, but most of our talks are free. At the moment we're not charging entrance to the museum, we're open 5 days a week, not Monday and Tuesday, but Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 4. So like we don't charge admission because the thing isn't finalised, you know, so it, you know, you do rely on your community, which we said are an ageing, you know, demographic. So even, you know, if we look in here, it's the same in Albany, like I get all the older people, you're lovely, you know, but like where's the 40-year-old kids, you know, and then their grandkids are all in doing Irish dancing school, every one of them practically, but they've never come to an event in the museum. So like there is that link to their culture, but they're not engaging fully. And you know, I kind of think if we don't get the 40-year-olds now, do we wait until they're 60 and you know, will they suddenly rediscover their passion, and will we still be here when they're 60? So that's the issue. That, you know, you don't have the family buy-in, the generational buy-in.
Very. So it's probably not under your purview, but like I'm very sad about the Quinnipiac,
Yeah.
you know, History Museum.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? And if they don't want it, can you take the stuff?
We have asked to take it. So we had several meetings with them, to be honest, at the time. But then when they got the Attorney General involved in Richard Blumenthal and stuff, it had to stay in the state. So in fairness, I have a very good working relationship with the new group that have taken over the Fairfield Irish. And actually my predecessor, Ryan Mahoney, was the director of Quinnipiac until kind of COVID and, you know, the whole thing. So he is a liaison now between the university and this new Fairfield Irish people. And so yes, we are apparently getting some of the pieces on loan, temporary loan, in the next couple of weeks. We just have to, it hasn't been finalised when it's coming. But like, I'm hoping that will be a sort of a long-term loan, because we do have this big room at the front and we're, you know, set up with security and insurance and all that jazz. And we had it before, so we should have it back. But yeah, like, there was a lot more, I think, to that. You know, I don't like to see the infighting that goes on in public newspapers, you know, but, you know, Quinnipiac owned the pieces. It wasn't ring-fenced. There was a few that were donated, but, you know, like, there wasn't a dedicated line of funding within the university. It was bought with operating money. Their, you know, duty of care is to the students, right, and the academics, and so even, you know, I worked at Fordham Institute of Irish Studies. The demographics are changing in these big Irish Catholic colleges, you know, and so I don't think they could justify the budget of keeping, you know, this little museum in Hampton open. So, I think they will make a go of it, these Fairfield people. I think they're very dedicated. It's a great collection. And so, you know, and I mean, I see no reason why, to be honest, the collection couldn't be broken up. Like, wouldn't it be lovely to have a few bits in Boston, a few bits in Chicago? I never understood the reason for keeping it together, but, you know, it is what it is. So, yeah. But anyway.
I do want to thank you for that brilliant presentation. I especially appreciated how you connected it to what's happening today, so it's a way to get people to think more broadly.
Yeah.
Also, I'm absolutely humiliated that my phone went off. I took my phone out, carefully did it, and then when it went off, not only did it go off, but I looked around indignantly.
So, are you ready for tea and scones?
Well, Tim.
Oh, Tim.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to take your place for a few minutes.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
No problem, thank you. I never shut down my thing. Oh, I did. Okay, good.
You're good. So in any case, thank you very much. First of all, I want to extend a thank you to Elizabeth. Fantastic. That's beautiful. Love that. A lot of history that was in there.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable. But we also want to take, before we head off for tea and scones, take this opportunity again to thank the Irish government and Consul General Alicia Moore for her continued support, and for the Irish immigrant program for giving us the capability of doing these programs and to have them continue. So, in any case.
Little bag.
Oh, yes. For you, Elizabeth.
Oh,
who are coming today.
thank you.
And so, I think that's it. All right, so tea and scones, everyone.